Every single iron that went through, that was built there at GE was plugged in and remained plugged in for a full hour, you know, from the time that they plugged it in to the time it got unloaded. You know, it got thoroughly checked. And some of those irons just exploded, and I remember the first iron that I saw explode and sparks come out, and I wanted to run, and everybody just kept right on working, you know, like it was an everyday thing. And it was an everyday thing. I had always wanted to work at GE because I always heard it was a good paying job, you know, job security and the whole bit. I loved my job. I loved going to work. I look forward to going to work.
The metal iron was invented in Ontario, only 2 short blocks west of where the iron plant is now, in 1902 by a man named Richardson, who was an engineer. He worked on the west side, expanded some, and ultimately worked over to the present location in 1904. And from 1904, that plant expanded and expanded and expanded, and as you know, it ended up being about 4 blocks long. That was a great invention in 1902 because Edison had invented electricity, but nobody had invented much of anything to use it for. There was a few light bulbs and not much else, and the iron was probably the first electrical appliance.
The flat iron worked out pretty well, except that it wasn't quite hot enough at the point. And Richardson, his wife complained when she would work into ruffles of her daughter's dresses, why it was hard to iron because it wasn't hot enough. So he developed an iron with a hotter point, and it became known as the hot point iron. The little company started out with 3 men and a boy, and shortly after, just a few months, why it was about 13 people, and it grew steadily through the years. During World War I, the business boomed tremendously. They could hardly make enough irons to keep up with the demand. And during that time, General Electric became interested in the plant. Prior to then, General Electric and Hot Point were competitors. On January 1st, 1918, there was a merger of the Hot Point Electric Heating Company, the appliance division of General Electric, and Hughes, which was a large plant in Chicago making ranges. And those 3 firms merged to become known as the Edison Electric Appliance Company, Incorporated. In 1928, it became the Edison General Electric Appliance Company, Incorporated. In 1932, this plant became known as the Ontario plant of the General Electric Company. And that's the name that it used until the recent shutdown in 1982.
Well, they started out, it was a small production deal, maybe 400 or 500 irons a day, and then increased it to about 1,000 a day, you know, after World War II. And then along came the automation, and they built overhead conveyors, and everything became automated, press rooms and stuff. And we began producing 10, 15,000 irons a day, maybe 20,000. And it continued at that speed up until they decided they no longer wanted to make irons here. They'd go overseas and make them cheaper. In 1969, we got the first word of it, and we pretty well realized, some of us, what was going to happen. That they developed a plastic iron over here, and that they were going to go overseas, and they said that any metal irons they made would be made in this country, which was a lie, because they started building factories down different parts of the world to take care of the metal iron too.
Well, my grandfather worked here, my dad works here, my uncle works here, my sister and her husband did work here, but they've moved on, and my mom worked here, and then myself.
What's everybody going to do now? All right.
I don't know. I don't know which way to turn.
Typically, a runaway plant is a plant that closes in the United States not because its owners are bankrupt or have mismanaged the company, but because they have found a more lucrative way to earn money, either making the same product or diversifying into other product lines or other arrangements, a more lucrative way overseas. And so the plant literally runs away overseas, and people are put out of work here, not because of bankruptcy, but in order for the owners to realize a greater profit somewhere else.
The biggest concern I had was the fact that if they were going broke, losing money, I can understand the closing. I had trouble understanding the closing of the major iron manufacturer in the United States. We produced 74% of all the metal irons consumed in the United States in 1981 right out of our Ontario plant. And I had a very difficult time understanding where somebody had the control of the market and was making a profit, why the need to close. And of course, ultimately, it was clarified in my mind that they told me in words of one syllable they were going to make plastic irons in Singapore, and that they could make the plastic iron in Singapore and sell it for roughly the same price as they sold the metal iron. They could make the plastic iron cheaper, therefore they'd make a larger profit.
And this one here, boy, have to edit that one out. This particular model here is one that we're just now introducing, which is a popular priced iron. It is designed to compete at the lower price range of the iron market, and it is replacing the iron that is currently being produced here in Ontario. It's what we call the model F363. And this is getting consumer acceptance in the field at a rate of about 4-to-1 over competitive metal models. And based upon the consumer response to plastic irons and our projection of the direction the iron market is going to go in, General Electric has decided to withdraw metal irons in the United States. We will no longer make metal irons for sale in the United States, but we will offer the lightweight irons as replacement irons with all types of features that the consumer requires and demands.
Jack, the cameras want a different angle on that pole.
So we can get it over there. So where are they going?
There was no reason for them to close this plant, except that they made these massive commitments abroad, and they could not fill those commitments without closing this plant. That doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it right.
Okay, did you get the shovel? Yeah, we got 2 hammers, we got the shovel. Yeah.
If they didn't want to stay in the business, let somebody else have it. But don't nail up the doors the way they nailed them up on us. And don't lie about it the way they lied about it. Hi, Dick. How you doing, Mary?
Happy funeral.
Yeah, happy funeral. We could have understood it if it hadn't been making a profit. You know, that wasn't the issue. Money was not the issue. You know, the company admitted that time and again. The investments that they made abroad, the commitments they had abroad, that was the problem. And that's where, you know, that's what they're looking to fill. To hell with this country and to hell with these people. And we bring good things to life. We do good things for you. Ha ha ha. I'd like to know who thought that one up. Certainly not the guy who's invested in this massive runaway situation like GE's involved in now overseas. They're moving more and more plants out of this country on an annual basis, and we just happen to be on the top of the list.
Where's your hatchet? Need a hatchet.
Here it is. People in this country, I don't know if they're asleep or maybe they're working every day and they see things like this and they feel sad about it, but the next day they forgot about it until it happens to them.
Does that qualify for a job?
They pay about $18 an hour.
General Electric Company don't want to be embarrassed, I don't think. But I wanted to embarrass them. And when they left town, I wanted to know that, hey, those guys in Ontario, boy, they put up a fight. And I know we did. And what we'd like to see is maybe this might be a turning point in this country, and this won't happen to some other people. We've got to stop it.
All right. That's deep enough.
Let's get it back. They'll hide it.
Oh, very.
All right. We're going to do this together, right? You take one terminal, I'll take one.
This marks the premature death of the metal iron. It had many, many more years of life in it. But for some unknown reason, and General Electric is the only one that knows, that we are going to bury it here today. Only America will ever revive this thing or ever make an iron in the Ontario plant again. And it's a shame that it has to go this way.
Alberto.
Ready?
Oh, yeah.
You know, GE, if they would have just kept the plant open just for an image, they'd have got the money out of this place because it became known throughout the whole world that Ontario was the iron capital of the world. And now what do we have up there? We just have a little plant that's going in there that's not going to have the workmanship that we have put into our jobs. There's not going to be as many people working there. I'm sure the wages aren't going to be the same. And what GE has done is destroyed their own image here in Ontario with many, many people. And there's people who are saying today that they will never, ever again buy a GE product. And we're getting letters from people from all over the country stating the same thing. I'll never buy a GE product. You mean to tell me that they were making a profit and they shut that plant down? Yes, they did. They were making a profit and they shut the plant down.
It's been good to know you.
No, wait a minute. The contact's on. We got to fix it.
In 1972, one of our competitors, the Sunbeam Corporation, developed a plastic iron. And this was the first time that a so-called plastic iron had been marketed in the United States. It was a very awkward design, but it did indicate some technology for the future. Our engineers at that time began to develop a so-called plastic iron by using the materials that were available to us at that time.
It was hard for us to consider the plastic iron as any kind of a threat because they were so inferior to what we manufacture. You can't get the heat up on plastic. It'll melt, you know. And the whole secret of ironing is heat.
This is an early engineering prototype, and if we pull this apart, you can see, for example, that in this particular model, that the water tank, the steam tank, if you will, is actually molded into place in the product. And if we compare that to a metal iron that we are currently manufacturing in this plant, where the top is a separate piece, the water tank is another piece, and it actually rests on top of the steam chamber and the sole plate. And you have many more discrete parts in the metal iron. What happens on the metal iron is that if it is dropped or on a hard surface, you face the risk of some of these parts breaking loose in the iron. With the plastic iron, because the parts are actually molded into place, you do not run that risk.
The metal iron, in my opinion, will outlast any plastic irons. You take a housewife, and the big thing that's in nowadays is Levi's. You try to iron a heavy pair of pants with plastic iron. I had a big iron yesterday, and I ironed 4 pair of Levi's, and I had to put pressure on the heavy iron. I can imagine what I would have had to done if I had a plastic iron.
We introduced the first production of plastic irons in Asheboro, North Carolina in 1977. We did that because we had excess capacity and plastics technology in Asheboro, North Carolina. And also at that time, this plant was running at full capacity.
Everything was shaping up to it. They were running the plant without any improvements and no equipment being brought in, nothing bought, and just running the heck out of everything, no repairs made, and just draining it and they're milking it out for every little cent they could get out of it without putting any cost into it. And then they were gradually phasing out each kind of iron.
When we elected to go with the full-size iron to follow and see what acceptance that would have, and that was in late 78, early 1979, we again went through the facilities question of where do we go to manufacture this full-size iron.
And the only thing they had ever replaced is something that quit and had to be replaced to continue production. As far as new improvements or anything, they never did anything. And
How long was that going on?
I know for the last 10 years that I worked there.
We looked around to the resources that were available in the company, and we found that in our Singapore facility that we've had since 1971, we had excess capacity, we had plastics technology, and we could go over there with a very minimum plant and equipment investment. And again, the Ontario plant was still running at full capacity, which is around 5 million irons a year. When we began to see the consumer acceptance for the plastic iron and began to see it have an effect on the sale of metal irons, we went through the question of where do we go with the Ontario plant. And it became apparent as we looked at the strengths and the weakness of the Ontario plant that it really wasn't feasible to convert this particular plant.
Our engineers developed that plastic iron down there at the General Electric plant. And the GE company claims it it's too costly or something to produce that plastic iron there. Well, we don't believe that because they make every part that goes that iron down there. And we've had molds, plastic molds and things down there for several years where we made our handles and all our plastic parts. And they could have put that stuff in there to make plastic irons. So we felt that all along, or I did, that they owed us that anyway. We could produce that plastic iron right there. So, of course, you know, they're going to go to somewhere else and do it. Another country, which seems to be the thing nowadays in this country. Everybody moves to somewhere else.
The decision process started really when we saw the market starting to transition to plastic, and the evidence really became very clear in very early 1981. And we started our decision process really to nail it down with respect to Ontario in June and July.
The company announced that they were in trouble. They were going to either shut down or sell it or something. So we decided that we were going to have one big march in protest of GE going to, you know, possibly shutting down the plant. And I guess it was one of the biggest marches Ontario ever had for a protest over something. So we decided right then that we were going to fight the General Electric company. We're not just going to let them come in and say, folks, we're shutting down, and then us just forget it, give us our money, and the end of it. We decided we were going to fight them until the very last day.
The chance of us saving the plant was against, you know, extremely high odds. We did everything we could to bring focus, publicity, and national attention to what was going on here. And in conjunction with that, we worked with the mayor of the city and the city council and the churches to find other buyers.
We had at least one company who is a national manufacturer who was willing to buy the plant and continue to manufacture the metal iron. Certainly General Electric had the right to decide to quit manufacturing, but they simply would not meet with this manufacturer, and therefore the iron plant did close as an iron plant.
We indicated to both the workers through their union representatives and to the community that if a metal iron buyer or somebody that wanted to manufacture metal irons came forward, that we would be willing to negotiate the sale of the plant to them. And that was our position from very early on.
What happened?
We didn't see any buyers come forward with the capital that could could do that.
They sold it to somebody that had absolutely no use for an iron manufacturing plant. And they did it, you know, for one cold, hard reason. That is, they don't want anybody to produce metal irons in this country that's going to compete against those plastic irons they're going to import. Because if GE didn't care about the metal iron and didn't care about that plant, the people would not be unemployed today. They would be in that plant working and making irons. But they wouldn't give us a chance because they don't want the metal iron on the market.
Well, all along we kind of thought that the company might surprise us and shut down, you know, say a week, maybe a week early, or come out all of a sudden and say, folks, here's your check, goodbye, you know. But that we thought, no, we worked right up until the 25th, and it was, just before 2 o'clock break. And by then we thought, you know, we're going to work tomorrow. But we were really upset when they come out at 1:45 or something like that and said, that's it, shut the lines off, go out the door, and that's it, we're going to pay you the rest of the day, plus tomorrow. But that's, you're through. Yeah, we thought that was kind of dirty of GE. I mean, that didn't give us much dignity. They shouldn't have a right to do us that way, just for the sole purpose of making more money. I think they owe it to people. They owe them something, you know. We're not robots yet. I know GE's got a company now making robots. They'd like to replace all the people with robots. If they ever do that, then they got it made, I guess. But we're not robots, and they owe us something, you know, besides just putting us out on the street.
This form, the green form that we're going to go over right now, will be a part of the records in your claim form. At various times, we will be using this form concerning you and your claim. Unemployment insurance is not just to pay unemployment insurance while you're unemployed. It is also to try and help you find work.
Well, it meant 1,000 jobs. The plant had dropped down to about 850, and the 1,000 people, 150 of those were already on layoff, so that we had already absorbed 150 jobs. Then it dropped to 750. The General Electric jet engine plant at the airport took almost 100. So we got down to 750, and then some of the people found other jobs and one thing and another, and ultimately we probably put about 600 out of work on the final day. But when you go into the ripple effect of a grocery store clerk here and a gas station attendant there and a drugstore person someplace else, that we guesstimated with models done at the University of California at Riverside, based on our specific area, probably affected about 3,000 jobs.
Increasingly, if you study the economic behavior of large corporations, you find that in the last 10 to 15 years, the percentage of their investments overseas has jumped in almost a quantum leap. In the case of General Electric Corporation, which I'm familiar with, the figure in 1968, the percentage figure of earnings by GE in 1968 overseas was only 16%. And by 1980, the proportion of earnings from GE's overseas international operations had risen to 37%. And I think that's rather typical of large multinational corporations diversifying their operations.
My father worked there. My brother worked there. Out of a family of 6 children and my mom and dad, the 8 of us, 6 of us at one time or another worked in that plant. So it was like, it's a way of life. You went to work there. That plant was the #1 employer in the community for 75 years. The roots were very deep, you know. 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation employees, families in that plant. We all grew up together. We knew each other. We'd worked together. We built the city together. It was just terribly, terribly deep-rooted, that plant, and the members and the workers in that shop in this community. It's going to be hard. I don't think any of us yet know where we're going to go or what we're going to do. I don't, and I know they don't. They're calling me. I'm going half crazy. I don't know what to tell them. I don't know what to tell me.
I'm 47 years old, and it's not going to be easy for me to find a job. I can't possibly see me going back to school. At my age, what would I do?
Well, I'll have to find some kind of a job if I can. Due to my health, I don't know. Otherwise that, I'll have to get along with nothing, probably.
What is the lowest starting wage you will accept on your next job? This is bottom line. How low will you go? Of course, anybody wants to receive the highest wage possible. We're talking about here, how low will you go? You've thought about this during the period when you knew the plant was closing down. You should give it some thought. The majority of the people here, their wage was more than is generally paid in this community. The probability is you are not going to find work at the wage you were making. You will find this out as you go out and apply for jobs. Take a look at what the jobs are paying. That is going to tell you what the wage demand is in the area. You should be looking, you should be considering as you go along, probably dropping your wage demand.
This is the beginning of what can happen with big companies. It's not only the beginning, they've already been doing it. I mean, they're starting going over there, making the production over there for 70 cents an hour, where we were drawing $8 and $9 an hour, you know? That's a nice profit. And I feel very strongly this way, if they get by with it, what is going to happen to the next generation and the next generation? The kids are going to be out roaming the streets like they are down in Mexico with malnutrition, and they can't afford to send their children to school. And, I mean, it's just going to be sad. I feel like we are the generation that is getting hit by it. The beginning of what could really be drastic to this country.
Take General Electric, they got all their small appliances, all their toasters, almost everything is gone and left this country. Light bulbs, and even the big stuff now is leaving, going to Ireland, a place like that, like big turbine generators, stuff like that. They're shipping out of this country. And it's a darn shame, because this country's not going to have anything left, and if people don't wake up, they're going to be sorry. They won't have nothing to be sorry about. You'll see riots and everything else in this country never, as far as I'm concerned, that's what it's leading to me, I think. You think Watts was a big deal, well, wait till in Chicago, wait till these people all get out of work. Because there's nothing here to keep them working anymore. They're moving it all out.
You know, it's weird how this country was brought up, and now how this country is helping other people instead of the American people. It's weird. We work our butts off for this country, and this country gives it all to other countries. No, that's unfair. It's unfair to the American people. It's unfair to everybody, except big business.
The issue here is a lot bigger than metal and plastic, in our feelings. It's the whole concept of American investments abroad, and how long, the workers in this country can continue to let plants close under their feet, and communities can survive the loss of jobs, in order to let these companies make these super profits that they're being able to make abroad. Like, labor is much cheaper. They're not subject to any environmental laws. The tax structure is a lot different. There's just all kinds of benefits there for companies to reap by going out of the country, you know, and we can't match them in this country.
I think you're always going to be faced with situations where you're going to have plant closings, where the industry is going to change, consumer preferences are going to change, technology is going to change, where it's just going to be unfeasible by any measurement to continue to operate a particular facility at a particular location. You're going to have to make a very tough decision as, hey, we have to close this facility. We're going to transfer resources to another area. That's been with us as long as we've had the so-called Industrial Revolution.
As long as the ultimate aim of the corporation is to generate profits for its stockholders, and that has to be placed first for the corporation, and that's the way our system works, it is going to decide the way GE decided, against the workers. And you asked me how an equitable arrangement could be made. I think the only way to do it would be to pass a federal law across the board that would create a balance between the need for a company to make a profit and the need for workers to be indemnified.
After in excess of 155 million irons, it's only fitting that its final resting place will be where it was first invented, here in Ontario, still the iron capital of the world.
You can't blame companies because there's a law that says they can close shop and move somewhere else, get tax write-offs, bring the money back in this country, but yet people like us are, what's going to happen to us? And they close the plant down, and everybody's sad or something for a few days, but 6 months later or a year later, where's those people that lost their jobs? Has any of them got jobs, or how many, or what's happened to them? Or some of them might commit suicide, lose their homes or something, but nobody seems to care. People that we elect in office, they come down on the bandwagon when it's time for them to come up for elections and say, hey, we're all for you people and all this stuff, and after they get elected, why, they forget about you people. And I've seen that happen many, many times.
I'm your General Electric progress reporter, Don Herbert, and tonight we're going visiting as the guests of Ronnie and Nancy Reagan in their new home in Pacific Palisades. One of the first things you notice about their home is the practical beauty of the lighting, and the Reagans have promised to show us how modern lighting helps them live better electrically.
All right. Lighting helps us live better all over the house. Now, if this weren't a company night, we'd probably find Nancy in the bedroom.
Reading, and the light's just perfect for it. The correct distance up and behind. And look at this, a switch that controls the lights all over the house, inside and out. I press the button, they go on instantly.
Patty might be in her playroom. That's her doll, Cynthia, she's playing with. Notice the lights. They look like Japanese lanterns, and they're just as colorful. Meanwhile, back in the den, Papa Reagan might be going over his script. And that's ideal, soft, over-the-shoulder light. So you see how modern light conditioning helps us have a more livable house.
You haven't forgotten the surprise, have you?
No, ma'am. We have a dimmer control for the living room, too. Watch when I turn it down.
Isn't it lovely? That's the view from our picture windows.
Well, those are some of the things we've done with lighting in our home. Might give you some ideas to help you see better and look better and live better in your home, and to make your surroundings more colorful and cheerful.
We hope so, because we'd like everybody to find out how wonderful it is to live better electrically.